Oh, he's Steve Kerr from Turner Sports and joining us on the program. Where do you want to start here, Steve?
Up to you. It's your show.
All right. Let me start with the Clippers here because I find it fascinating. I'll work my way back to last night's game that you called. But Chris Paul says he's upset that he's being portrayed as this guy who got Vinny Del Negro fired. If the owner comes out and says, we like Vinny, but it's a players-run league, who's the reason why, or what's the reason why Vinny Del Negro is not coaching the Clippers anymore?
Pretty easy to figure out, right?
I would think I can connect the dots here, but if Chris Paul, I don't know if somebody said to Chris Paul, did you want to keep Vinny? I mean, that would have been my question. Did you say to Donald Sterling, I wanted to keep him, or this just happened on your watch and you move on, so you don't really care who's going to be your head coach? Make some sense of this.
Well, I read the story, and Chris isn't actually quoted. It's I sourced close to Chris, whatever that means. I mean, every quote in the article was not from an actual person. It was just a source. So we don't really know who's saying what. But Sterling's comments publicly are pretty much they're implicating the stars of the team. That's obvious.
Well, I said, look, if you give them the power, they'll use the power. And I understand it. If I'm Chris Paul and you say, you want me to sign a max deal, who's my coach? I didn't really like that coach. Or, can we make a change?
Well, and that's fine. But it has to be handled internally so that you don't get comments like that allow people to connect the dots. And that's what I would assume Chris is upset about. It has to be done the right way. And that was absolutely handled the wrong way.
Well, could it backfire on the Clippers if Chris Paul looks at the owner and says, why would you say that? Because if Donald Sterling has a must-lie situation and just says this, you know what, I made the decision as we move forward, that this is, I thought we needed to take the next step, and that's why we're looking for another head coach who can take us to the next level. If he says that, Chris Paul's off the hook.
Yeah, and he needs to. Because I think there is a good chance Chris could be just fed up and leave. But as we know, the rules favor the home team in terms of years and money on the contract. And Chris is in a pretty good spot with the roster that's around him. So I would expect that he'd be able to get past that. But that's for internal discussion for sure.
More likely to stay in L.A., Chris Paul or Dwight Howard?
I think they're both likely to stay. Do I have to rank them?
Yeah.
I'll say Chris Paul more likely to stay.
All right. Talking to Steve.
I think he seemed to really enjoy L.A. and enjoy playing in the big market, whereas Dwight seemed a little out of sorts. So I would guess Dwight would be more likely to leave than Chris.
Steve Kerr, Turner Sports, joining us. He did the game last night on TNT. LeBron's third quarter, that performance reminded you of?
You're just setting me up for this, aren't you?
Yeah.
Yeah, it was pretty reminiscent of 23. There's, Frank Vogel said earlier in the series, there's just about 8 or 10 plays a game that we can't scheme for. And it's just LeBron's going to make a spectacular play. And I think he made them all in the third quarter. It was remarkable. And I think what happened was they came out with a lot more energy. Miami has an extra gear that most teams don't have. Indiana doesn't have. And that gear is their defense, and it's LeBron. And it's amazing. Wade and Bosch gave them next to nothing.
Yeah.
And LeBron just put them on their shoulders.
Do you think LeBron's looking around and noticing this, that if Udonis Haslem is the guy who steps up, I mean, he's got to be thinking, where am I going with this team down the road with Bosch, Dwayne Wade's health? Do you think that factors in with anything with LeBron James and how long he stays in Miami?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I think I wonder that same thing every time I see Pat Riley looking from the stands. What is Pat going to do this offseason? I think it's pretty clear this is not, as constituted, this is not a 3 or 4 championship team. 3 is probably the max they're going to get out of this group. So they're going to have to revamp some things. Pat is probably watching how Miami's getting destroyed on the board. You got Chicago and Indiana next year that are on the rise, 2 teams that can really dominate the paint. And this Miami team it feels like it's kind of on fumes right now and just relying on the brilliance of LeBron.
And then you have the Spurs waiting and resting. And I think that's what people were concerned about. This Spurs team with everybody, the stars over the age of 30, and a lot of mileage there, wear and tear. The benefit of this rest for the Spurs is going to mean what if they're facing the Miami Heat?
I don't see the benefit at all.
Oh, okay.
I think it's a negative. I think when you come off a playoff series, ideally you have about 5 days until the next series. You get a couple of days off and a couple of days to really lock in. And
why is it, Steve? We always in the media think rest is a good thing for you guys. Why are we wrong?
Because it's rhythm more than rest. And to me, you get your rest in about 3 days. Like if you can get 3 days in between games in the regular season, then you're thrilled. You get a day off, you get a couple of good days of practice, and you're recharged. But if you get 10 days off, your rhythm is challenged. The way you've played all season long, 82 games, pretty much every other night or every third night you're playing. And now all of a sudden, the biggest game of the year, you have 10 days off. I don't think that does you any good at all. Any
chance Birdman suspended for Game 6?
I don't think so. It was Reggie made the point last night. It was very similar to Nazr Mohammed's shove on LeBron. Nazr Mohammed was not suspended. He was ejected from the game. I don't think you can suspend the Birdman simply because he wasn't ejected and you're trying to make ends meet. I just think I think he's going to be fine.
And I don't like flopping, but if Tyler Hansbrough sells that a little bit more, maybe it's a different outcome here.
He's ejected. I mean,
right?
LeBron sold it with Nazi, and I blame Roy Hibbert. He actually caught Hansbrough. He just let him go. Maybe flung him to the floor.
Well, safe travels back to Indiana. We always appreciate you joining us. Thanks, buddy.
You got it, Dan. I got a car full of TNT people wishing you well. Tim Kiley and Ernie Johnson. Although Tim said he wants to pop you. I don't know what that's all about, but Ernie says hi.
Give the phone to Ernesto. Let me say hello to him.
Hang on, Ernie.
Okay. Ernie Johnson from TNT.
Hello, Dan.
Hi, buddy. How are you?
I'm wonderful. How about you?
Are you riding shotgun? It feels like you're in the back seat.
I'm in the back seat with Steve, and then in the way back is your buddy Tim Kiley.
Could you fit Barkley, or could Shaq fit in there right now?
Shaq is actually riding, those big duffel bags you can put on top of an SUV. That's actually where he is right now. He dared us. He said he bet he could do it on a drive to Fort Lauderdale, and that's what he's doing.
It's like when you kill an animal and you put it up on the roof. So you got him strapped to the roof.
He's on the roof. We got Charles on the grill. Yeah, so it's quite the scene on 95 North.
I always wanted to know this. The maddest you ever got at those guys, because it seems like there's always fun on the show, and you're great at landing the planes there at LaGuardia. Have you ever gotten angry at those guys?
Just once. It was during the playoffs a few years ago, because I kind of had my format for the show written down on index cards and a couple of notes, maybe a couple of quotes from the paper. And Charles reached over before a show and ripped it in half before a post-game show. And I was ready to kill him. I was ready to go after him no matter what happened to me. But that was like 5 or 6 years ago. But we still laugh about it, because every now and then Charles look over and make this motion with his hands like, I'm going to rip your card up.
Do you do a better impersonation of Barkley or Shaq?
Shaq.
All right, let me hear.
What are you asking for one?
Yeah.
Hey, let me set myself on fire on the show, and I think that'd be funny. And if you don't think I'd do it, I will. I'll do whatever you want. And then the loser of the bet has to walk around with a pair of pink panties on. There you go. That's me. That's my best spur of the moment Shaq.
Thank you, bud. Safe travels to you guys. Tell Kylie I said hello. Thank you, bud.
Dan says hello. Okay. Thanks, Steve. Thanks, Steve.
Okay. That's Ernie Johnson, Steve Kerr. Tim Kiley was a producer at the mothership. Great guy. And he's the guy who brought in sort of that blueprint template for the halftime show. His sensibilities made that a very successful show.